Welcome everyone, this is Hypnoser, and this is another presentation from the philosophy series, but I think I will make the second season of it because this is like advanced ways of questioning reality. Uh, we go into right now, and this lecture is the first part of the lecture, and it's called Creating Time and its Relation to Choice. Okay, so these are the things we are going to mention in the today's lecture. So first, start with a deceptively. Let's start with a deceptively simple question. Do you believe? Now, if we go for the yes option, now here we risk being shown as a fanatic or a radical guy. But on the other hand, if we answer no, we will be perceived as a depressed madman. So, how to approach this question? As we see, the thing is not as straightforward. It seems that absurdist nihilists choose the no option in here as a better one. But does this choice depend on them, or is it an illusion? Now we consider two following cases. It makes sense, and in this case they basically chose no, and not much of a debate over here. But we also have the second option where the choice makes no sense. In this case, the concept of faith loses its reason and annihilates the way of perceiving. And we're going to talk about way of perceiving a little bit more in the next slides. Okay. Okay. So here we treat faith as a type of reference. We will say in a moment what reference is. So essentially we need to answer the question, what does the interpretation of reality without concept of reference consist in? Before we answer that, let's see what a reference is. Reference is explanation in terms of general cause, and without it we are not looking for a cause from which our world originates. Theoretically we are not condemned to the deterministic approach, and we are in a situation where conflict within the matrix has also lost its reason. So theoretically we can propose anything. However, from Infinity Towers we know that the lack of limitation can have negative consequences, and because of that we need to take preventive measures. So what conclusions can we draw from the annihilation of perception that happened in the previous slides? So the philosophy loses its reason, annihilation of contact with the world also happens, and because this annihilation happens we need the neo-creation process. We will describe it in a minute. It is necessary to define a language that will enable the description of our world in an understandable way. Yes, to regain contact, we must define perception once again. Okay, so how does it happen? We have two components of perception: elementary function and positioning. Okay, and here we have the most important elements of elementary function and positioning: creative language, building blocks, place for construction, and positioning, places of, and so choosing places for the building blocks. And yes, this process of world creation is somehow somewhat similar to Towers of Infinity that were mentioned earlier on in the series. So now let's try to define time, what the time is. And in order to have a concept of time, we need to have a time loop where the integer describing the time flow is increasing +1 with each run of the loop. We can change possibility. We have possibility of changing the increment speed. So we can have that thing called speed increase. But usually it is 0 unless we enter a different value for it. Okay. Okay. So for changing time, we need the variable reassigned value time. And the object changes its time position. Because the time is flowing, but we need the variable that says that the object is flowing with that time and not just staying in one time moment. Okay, to meet the earlier version of yourself, if that ever happens, you need to remember the history of behavior of objects through time, and then access the historic frame where that object was. Sort of. Okay, so we to ask ourselves the question: is an object changing its time position to a larger one able to see later versions of objects? This will only happen if the future is determined, because if we're not sure about the future, we don't know how the object will look like. That's sort of like visiting the future in Christmas Carol, where the guy showing the future shown multiple entrances because future was not determined in that story. Okay, that's sort of how seeing time position in the future would work. Okay, what we can conclude from the time creation process we have just talked about. Loop is a function of a lot of variables. Whether the time loop stops does not have to depend on time. That depends of the loop, but maybe. Okay. While in the past History is determined, future doesn't have to be, we already talked about that. Oh yes, and again, complex functions can cause system crash, like in the dialogue with architect. So anyway, that would be all for today's lecture. Thank you guys for watching. We see each other in the next episode.